Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're stepping into a really chilling personal account. It's a narrative that profoundly challenges, the boundaries of perception and control.
Indeed. We're going to be navigating a very intricate story, one that the author, the buyer, insists is absolutely factual. It offers this rare glimpse into what they call conspiracy facts, not theories.
Right. So our mission today is to really explore the experiences of the buyer from the World Succession Deed 1400. These are chronicled in their autobiographical notes titled 9KMV Station 10B ISO.txt. And this isn't just about understanding like a sequence of events. It's about trying to see the world through the eyes of someone subjected to truly extraordinary circumstances, all within an institution they call Black Site Berlin, or sometimes penal psychiatry.
And just to be clear for everyone listening, when we say Black Site Berlin, we're referring to the buyer's description. They see it as a covert, disguised secret prison. And in their account, the personnel there, well, they're understood by the buyer to be acting interchangeably, sometimes on behalf of Germans, sometimes Americans, sometimes Russian states.
Wow.
All operating supposedly under the umbrella of an international deep state. It's a really profound claim suggesting this highly coordinated, clandestine operation that the buyer views as entirely real.
And central to understanding why the buyer believes they were targeted is their claim to something called the World Succession Deed 1400.
Exactly. And this deed, as the buyer describes it, represents a matter of, well, immense global significance in their view. They believe their torment was orchestrated specifically to avoid a contractual solution related to it.
So to circumvent the deed somehow.
Precisely. To instead trigger what they call an illegal succession. That's the core of their interpretation of the motive.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's take a deep dive into this world of methodical control and profound resilience, as witnessed and recorded by the buyer themselves.
Yeah.
So the buyer's account, it reads almost like a clinical record of their ordeal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It starts in an isolation cell at a place they identify as Wilhelm Sender House, Station 10B. And they immediately label this place a black site. Right from the start.
Yes, that framing is immediate.
But initially, those first days, they describe them as unspectacular, which is, kind of eerie, right? A period of calm.
Septic calm, yeah.
Before the storm. It's a really striking contrast to the systematic suffering that apparently unfolds pretty quickly.
And that's what's really fascinating here, that almost immediate pivot from that initial sort of deceptive normalcy to deliberate, calculated manipulation.
Okay.
The very first clear act of control, as the buyer describes it, isn't presented as a threat. It's presented as an act of grace.
Grace. How so?
Well, this framing, it's crucial because it highlights the psychological cunning they perceived.
Yeah.
Using a seemingly kind gesture to start breaking down trust, lowering the guard of someone who's already vulnerable.
Right. And the buyer recounts this moment vividly. The caretaker offered them hot tea.
Simple. Right. Comforting.
Exactly. So simple, so comforting, easily accepted, especially as they describe feeling cold and just longing for something with taste, something beyond the blandness.
You can almost feel that flicker of humanity, that need for warmth.
Yeah. But this seemingly innocuous offer, as the buyer soon found out, was, well, a Trojan horse. A calculated setup.
And the turn was swift and absolute, according to them. Within just half an hour of drinking that tea, the buyer describes being heavily sedated.
Half an hour?
Yeah, experiencing what they call a full blast.
Wow.
And this isn't described as just a mistake, like an accidental overdose. It's presented as the deliberate opening move in a series of games designed to exert complete control.
Okay, so this wasn't accidental. This was the first play.
That's how they see it. This initial overwhelming sedation served as this stark, terrifying introduction to the environment's true nature from their perspective, establishing right away that their bodily autonomy, their mental clarity, was completely compromised. It set a really disturbing precedent for their time in Black Site Berlin.
Okay, this next part, it really brings the systematic nature of the control they describe into focus. You might expect, immediate hostility everywhere in a place like that.
Right, total antagonism from the get-go.
But what the buyer observed next is arguably even more chilling. They noted that most of the Black Site Berlin staff on Station 10B were initially neutral towards them.
Neutral, not hostile.
Not hostile from day one. which suggests this more insidious, gradual, systematic shift, almost like an infection spreading through the staff.
It makes the later transformation even more disturbing.
Exactly.
And it raises this really important question. How do you systematically turn a neutral environment hostile? Turn its personnel into active participants in these coercive tactics?
How do they describe it happening?
Well, the buyer describes an Oberpfleger that's a head nurse from Station 10A, which is where the buyer had come from originally.
Go ahead.
This individual, according to the buyer, had nothing to do on this station, Station 10B. Yet they systematically approached the staff members there over several days, engaging them in discussions, one by one.
So someone from outside the immediate unit deliberately interacting with the staff there.
Correct. The consistent, seemingly out-of-place presence of this specific person is a key detail in the buyer's account. It suggested to them a deliberate campaign to influence the existing staff.
It's like watching a chess game unfold piece by piece.
Yeah.
Right? And the buyers saw this happening.
Right before their eyes, according to the notes, they observed a direct, negative change in the staff who'd been approached. A disturbing shift towards abusive and dismissive behavior.
And this wasn't just like random bad moods.
No, the buyer clearly attributes this transformation to staff being, in their words, bribed and pulled to the dark side, suggesting a deliberate external influence corrupting what should have been, a caregiving role.
A calculated campaign to create a hostile environment.
Precisely. And this detail is absolutely critical for understanding the buyer's perception of Black Site Berlin in its full context.
How so?
Because the buyer explicitly views this manipulation as the personnel being remote controlled by the deep state.
Okay, so directly linking it to this larger structure.
Yes. It highlights the clandestine, covert nature they perceived in the operation, suggesting the staff's actions weren't independent, but orchestrated by a larger hidden power structure. Fulfilling the buyer's definition of a disguised secret prison where these international state interests, German, American, Russian, converge.
And the implication then is?
The implication, from the buyer's perspective, is that they were already earmarked, destined for this specific station populated by these manipulated individuals. It sets this incredibly disturbing, predetermined tone for their entire stay.
Like the whole thing was a setup from the beginning.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a meticulously planned scenario, far beyond what you typically associate with, say, standard psychiatric confinement.
And it wasn't just human manipulation, right? The environment itself became, according to the buyer, a tool of torture.
Absolutely. The physical space was weaponized.
They detail being dressed in this knee-length isolation gown adorned with smileys.
Smileys. The irony is just stark.
Incredibly stark. But crucially, they were naked underneath. This image, forced cheerfulness, masking extreme vulnerability and physical exposure. It's profoundly disturbing.
It really is. It serves as this visual metaphor for the deep psychological torment they describe, a cruel juxtaposition of outward cheer and inward suffering.
And then the actual physical conditions.
Yes, the strategic deployment of environmental conditions. It's a classic tactic in coercive environments designed specifically to break someone's will, their spirit, through sustained discomfort.
So what do they experience?
The buyer recounts the onset of winter, a time you desperately need warmth, right?
Of course.
Yet the floor heating was turned off, and the air conditioning running full blast.
Full blast AC in winter.
Yes. Creating this intensely cold environment. The buyer describes shivering constantly, freezing even under the covers, the cold just creeping in from all sides. It was a deliberate, sustained attack on basic human comfort.
Transforming the cell into this constant source of agony.
Exactly. And not just for a day or two.
No, this wasn't brief. This agonizingly cold condition, they say it persisted for 5 months.
5 months.
Spanning the entire winter, right through into spring. Can you imagine? 5 months of being relentlessly cold, shivering, never truly warm.
It's hard to fathom. It's described as this prolonged systemic infliction of physical suffering, emphasizing the brutal, intentional nature of their confinement within what they call this penal psychiatry setup.
So not neglect.
Not neglect, according to the buyer. It was perceived as an active, calculated weaponization of the environment itself.
Okay, so we have the psychological manipulation of staff, the environmental torture. And then the account shifts to something even more insidious, doesn't it?
Yes, arguably more pervasive. The systematic contamination of their food and water.
They describe consistently refusing any offered medication, right? Trying to maintain clarity.
Maintaining suspicion, trying to stay alert. only to discover, they claim, that psychopharmaceuticals were being mixed into practically everything they consumed.
Everything.
Water, food. It's a chilling narrative of covert drugging, designed, in their view, to break their will and distort their perception of reality.
How did they think it was being delivered? Especially if they were refusing pills.
Well, this raises questions about the methods, the planning involved. Water, for instance, was only provided in a cup, passed through a small hatch in the isolation door.
Ah, okay, so easy to add something liquid.
Effortlessly easy, yes. Discreetly, without consent, without even direct observation of the act itself.
And there was something else they observed.
Yes, what's particularly unsettling here is the buyer's observation of an unseen individual, someone consistently monitoring the black site staff during these deliveries.
Monitoring the staff.
Yeah, suggesting a higher level of oversight, of coordination, a subtle confirmation for the buyer of the remote-controlled nature of the operations they described earlier.
Wow. That level of calculated, almost theatrical control is just deeply unnerving.
It is, and the buyer's attempts to resist, like demanding sealed water bottles instead of open cups.
Did that work?
Apparently not. They say these attempts were met with escalating contamination. First, the sparkling water they received was tainted. Then, when they switched to still water, that too was soon compromised, they claim.
So nowhere to turn for safe water.
It seemed like it. In a desperate act of self-preservation, they resorted to drinking tap water, making sure to do it in unobserved moments.
Okay.
And they'd dispose of the tainted bottled water in the isolation shower, pretending to have drunk it. It was this constant, exhausting battle of wits, a daily struggle just to avoid being drugged.
But even that didn't last.
No, that reprieve was short-lived, according to the account. Eventually, the buyer recounts that even the tap water and, unbelievably, the shower water were contaminated.
The shower water. How?
The notes don't specify how, just that they perceived it as contaminated, too. At this point, the buyer describes feeling completely delivered to their captors. Utterly helpless, without recourse.
Like every escape route was sealed off?
Exactly. This systematic poisoning led to constant sedation, severely impacting their cognitive functions, their physical well-being, and in a truly harrowing moment of sheer desperation.
What?
They describe attempting to drink their own urine.
Oh my God.
Though they found it impossible to actually swallow, it just highlights the extreme measures they felt driven to in their struggle for bodily integrity, for freedom from this chemical influence.
And the food wasn't safe either, you said?
No. Meals, especially soups, were described as heavily laced with medication.
Soups, specifically.
Yes, the buyer noted soups were particularly easy to pump full of liquid psychopharmaceuticals because of their consistency. You wouldn't notice it as easily.
So how did they try to deal with that?
They developed this cunning tactic. Eating in the small bathroom, strategically out of sight of the observation room window.
Okay, hiding while eating.
Yes. And then, as discreetly as possible, flushing most of the food down the toilet. It was essentially a silent hunger strike.
A covert act of resistance.
Exactly. Undertaken specifically to avoid being visibly force-fed via a nasal tube. A method they feared their tormentors would surely love to use to further torment them.
The consequences must have been severe physically.
They were. The buyer experienced extreme weight loss, nearing 50 kilograms, which is over 100 pounds.
Wow.
This drastic physical decline then prompted the black site staff, according to the buyer, to attempt something truly bizarre, chemically fattening them.
Chemically fattening them after starving them.
A cruel inversion, yes. This apparently involved a range of methods, offering cortisone, rubbing a specific chemical into towels that would transfer to the skin.
Onto the skin.
Yes, causing immediate noticeable weight gain, they claim. And also mixing substances into shower gel with the same purpose. It was this new, unsettling phase of the chemical battlefield.
But the buyer noticed this. They were aware.
They remained acutely aware, hypervigilant to every change. They felt sudden fat cushions appear on their skeletal frame, a stark, alarming contrast.
That must have been terrifying.
Absolutely. Recognizing these suspicious signs, they immediately stopped using the treated towels and the shower gel, opting instead to air dry after showering.
Smart. Did they stop taking towels altogether?
No, interestingly, they continued to accept fresh towels from staff, but they noted a telling detail. The personnel would handle these towels only while wearing latex gloves.
Ah.
A small but significant confirmation for the buyer that their suspicion of chemical manipulation was accurate. It really speaks to their incredible hyper-awareness in the face of this ongoing chemical warfare.
Even fruit wasn't safe. I remember reading that.
Correct. Even the attempt at a seemingly safer food choice, like opting for fruit, was meticulously compromised, according to the account.
What did they notice?
Consistent syringe marks on the stem of the kiwi fruit provided.
Syringe marks on kiwi.
Yes, leaving no doubt in their mind that it too had been tainted. So they regularly disposed of it in the toilet.
But the staff might notice the peel missing.
They anticipated that. When questioned by staff about the absence of the kiwi peel, the buyer fabricated a story about eating the whole kiwi, peel and all.
Wow, the mental energy that must have taken.
Incredible. It illustrates the absolute thoroughness, the determination of the contamination efforts they perceived, and the constant vigilance required just for day-to-day survival in this environment where nothing, not even fruit, could apparently be trusted. #5 physiological attacks and psychological warfare.
So beyond this slow, insidious poisoning, the buyer also describes more acute, terrifying physiological attacks?
Yes, moments of intense physical crisis. One day, after yet another full-blast sedation, something truly horrific occurred, according to the notes.
What happened?
Their eyes rolled back severely in their head, they convulsed violently, and experienced hours of complete blackout.
A blackout, like lost time.
Complete loss of consciousness and memory for hours. This was described as unprecedented, profoundly disturbing, far beyond mere sedation. It stripped them of consciousness, of control.
And they link this to something specific.
Yes, this particular incident, as the buyer recounts, directly links to their assertion that devil stuff was being introduced into their food and drink.
Double stuff, meaning?
Substances far more potent and dangerous, in their view, than standard psychopharmaceuticals. It highlights the severe, unpredictable effects of the chemical compounds they believed were being administered without consent, pushing their body to its absolute limits.
The reaction sounds extreme.
So extreme, so alien to their prior experience that it clearly pointed, in their mind, to potent, potentially lethal, and certainly non-therapeutic agents being used.
And as if that internal torment wasn't enough, the external environment threw more horror at them. The rat incident?
Yes, the rat. The buyer recounts lying in bed one evening and hearing a sudden splash in the toilet.
Oh.
To their astonishment, a rat emerged from the bowl, apparently looking for the kiwis they'd been flushing.
A rat came out of the toilet in an isolation cell.
Exactly. This visceral detail, it just adds this chilling layer of horror, but it also underscores the clinic's alleged huge rat problem, which, according to the buyer, extended even into these supposedly hermetically sealed isolation cells.
It just shatters any illusion of a contained, sterile environment.
Completely, further dehumanizing their confinement.
And it's after recounting things like this that the buyer makes that really strong comparison.
Yes, they draw that chilling parallel, referring to the entire situation as a KZ black site dye gas camera.
Concentration camp, black site, gas chamber.
Explicitly making those comparisons, it's not casual. It sets this incredibly grim, serious tone for the systematic gassing operations they then go on to describe.
Okay, let's unpack that. The gassing. They describe different methods.
Yes. First, a daytime method. A chemical atomizer was placed on the floor in the adjacent observation room.
The room where staff watch from?
Correct. Placed directly under a ventilation shaft that blew air into their cell.
So directly piped in?
Effectively, yes. And black site staff would activate it, then crucially leave the observation room unoccupied for hours.
Which is unusual.
Highly unusual, according to the buyer. Given that the room was supposed to be constantly staffed for observation, this deliberate absence during the gassing emphasized for them the calculated, controlled nature of it, ensuring they received a full, uninterrupted dose.
And the gas itself.
It varied in strength and duration, suggesting to the buyer a kind of controlled experimentation with them as the subject.
Was there any proof, any indication of its effects beyond what the buyer felt?
There was one particularly telling incident. A staff member was refilling the atomizer and was himself affected by the fumes.
The staff member got gassed.
Yes. The buyer observed his legs giving way, forcing him to lean on a desk for support.
Wow. That's pretty direct evidence of its potency.
Undeniable evidence, even from the handler's perspective, of the gas's potency and danger. It underscores the lethal potential the buyer perceived in these substances. They even noted internally, whoever digs a pit for others falls into it himself. A moment of grim irony.
But then things changed at night. A different gas.
Yes, things changed drastically at night. A special gas was introduced. Sweet, chemical smelling, they described it, and much stronger.
Where'd this one come from?
This came from the hallway, through the air conditioning unit in the small, open bathroom area within the cell, after the nightly lock-in.
So no escape, sealed windows, no fresh air.
Exactly. The cell became an inescapable trap. No way out from this encroaching chemical cloud that slowly filled the space, rendering them helpless as they drifted into unconsciousness.
And this nighttime gassing is linked to one of the most disturbing conspiracy facts they present, right? The blood extraction.
Precisely. This special gas, delivered nightly, would render them unconscious. And this induced unconsciousness is then connected by the buyer to a terrifying discovery.
What do they find?
Waking up one morning, feeling dizzy, profoundly weak, and finding a large triangular bruise, about 7 by 7 centimeters, prominently on their left forehead.
Triangular.
Yes, exactly matching the corner of their concrete bed.
But how could they hit their head that hard without noticing?
That's what the buyer questioned. It seemed impossible to hit their head with such force in such an unnatural position without any memory of the impact, suggesting to them external intervention while they were unconscious.
And there was more.
Yes. Upon further painful investigation, they found another bruise. A 4-centimeter oval bruise with a distinct needle mark in the center on their right thigh, about 10 centimeters above the knee end.
A needle mark.
Yes. And this immediately triggered vivid mental images for the buyer. A vision, they call it, of the night's events.
What did they see in this vision?
Men in gas masks entering the isolation cell while they were unconscious, lifting and turning them, causing their head to hit the bed corner. And then, most terrifyingly, extracting large amounts of blood from their thigh using a needle.
And this explained the weakness.
It perfectly explained, in their mind, the extreme weakness and severe circulatory problems they experienced upon waking.
Was this a one-off?
No. The buyer recounts that this exact scenario repeated 1-to-1 about 4 weeks later, though thankfully without the head injury the second time.
Which leads to the obvious question.
Why such large quantities of blood?
Exactly. The buyer poses this directly. It was clearly far beyond what would be needed for routine blood tests, which were already being done periodically anyway.
So the scale suggested something else entirely.
Yes. It suggested to the buyer a far more sinister, premeditated purpose, hinting at a long-term plan.
And their explanation connects back to the deed.
Directly. The buyer links it explicitly to these NWO conspiracy facts in the international deep state. They believe the collected blood is being stored.
To do what? To fake their death in a future explosion on day X.
Fake their death. Why?
As an event specifically intended to avoid that contractual solution regarding the World Succession Deed 1400. Instead of a legitimate outcome for the deed, this engineered death would trigger an illegal succession.
Allowing powerful actors to seize whatever the deed represents, bypassing legal channels.
That is precisely the buyer's stated belief and interpretation of the motive behind the blood extractions.
It reveals what they perceived as the ultimate goal of the Black Site's operations.
Yes. To render the buyer legally incapacitated or completely dead, thereby clearing the path for this predetermined illicit outcome related to the deed.
They even speculate on the details of this day X.
They do. An explosion near a future apartment, or maybe even more subtly, in a homeless shelter.
Why a homeless shelter?
Ideal, they note, due to camera surveillance and the ease of orchestrating conflict via an agent provocateur, forcing the buyer to leave just before the planned explosion.
Wow. And tracking devices, too.
They believe the scenario could also involve pre-chipped tracking devices secretly implanted in both the buyer and their mother, ensuring constant surveillance and control over their movements leading up to this planned day X.
Despite this terrifying vision, their resolve seems unbroken.
Absolutely clear and unyielding. They state they refuse to be declared dead or silenced. They even declare their plan to be armed upon release and to expose the helpers, the individuals they see as perpetrators within this network via social media.
And publishing these notes is part of that.
Yes. Publishing these very notes, they claim, already foils the original plan. It forces a recalculation by the deep state. This act of meticulous documentation, of dissemination, is, for the buyer, an act of profound and defiant survival.
It really presents this profound challenge, doesn't it? The buyer's account paints a picture where their very existence, their claims to this deed, make them a target for these elaborate multi-state efforts.
Efforts to control or eliminate them. It suggests a world, from their perspective, where a person's life can be just meticulously orchestrated by unseen hands for geopolitical or economic gain. A truly unsettling prospect that the buyer presents as their lived reality. Hashtag Chegg6, escalation in the small isolation cell, and moments of resistance.
And the torment didn't stop there. It actually escalated further, didn't it, when they were moved?
Yes, transferred to an even smaller and stuffier isolation cell.
And this one didn't even have a private bathroom.
Correct, which meant resorting to using a duct, basically a urinal bottle within the cell, a deeply degrading experience, and having these tightly timed, supervised blitz toilet visits in an external patient bathroom for anything else.
Just an extreme reduction in personal space, dignity, autonomy.
Absolutely. And the impact of the gassing in this even more confined space,
Must have been worse.
drastically worse. The buyer describes it in harrowing terms. Unbearable. Pure psychological terror, true hell. In such cramped, airless conditions, the same amount of gas just felt exponentially more potent, more suffocating.
Pushing them to their absolute limit.
Physically and mentally. And this raises that question. What happens to the human spirit under such extreme, relentless pressure?
Did it break them?
Well, for the first time in their life, despite enduring immense hardship before, the buyer experienced serious suicidal thoughts.
Oh, no.
But they clarify, and this is important, these thoughts weren't seen by them as a sign of weakness, but rather a desperate, almost rational escape from what they perceived as unbearable psychological and physical torture.
But they couldn't act on it.
Thankfully, no. They had absolutely no means to act on these thoughts within the cell, which in itself demonstrates their fundamental will to survive, despite the circumstances pushing them to that edge.
And the smaller cell also removed ways they'd been resisting.
Yes, it systematically eliminated those previous avenues. They could no longer secretly dispose of contaminated food in a private bathroom.
Forcing them to consume it.
Exactly. To avoid the immediate violent restraint and forced feeding via nasal tube that they were certain would follow any open refusal. It represented a total loss of bodily autonomy in that respect.
Further descent into the system's control, truly trapped.
Yes, trapped within the black site's deliberate program, as they saw it.
But even then, even in this extreme confinement, they found ways to resist.
They did. Upon returning to the slightly larger, though still gassed, isolation cell after their time in the smaller one, a small act of defiance provided this glimmer of hope.
What happened?
They discovered something new, a borehole in the bathroom wall with a telescopic camera inside.
A camera in the bathroom wall.
Yes, meticulously positioned to monitor their previously unseen actions, precisely where they had been disposing of the contaminated food.
That discovery being watched even there.
That violation.
Must have been crushing, total surveillance. But what's fascinating is the buyer's immediate, effective response.
What did they do?
Recognizing the borehole, they quickly stuffed toilet paper into it, blocked the camera.
Yes. Successfully ending total surveillance in that particular private area. A small victory, maybe, but hugely significant in their constant battle for any semblance of privacy and control.
It's a testament to that unwavering determination.
It really is. And this act of resistance, this small victory, led to another crucial discovery, born from that heightened awareness.
What was that?
As they were dealing with the camera, they noticed the adjacent air conditioning unit wasn't running at that moment.
Okay.
Seizing this unexpected opportunity, they ingeniously covered its ventilation grill with a thick layer of wet toilet paper.
Wet toilet paper on the AC vent. Why?
Clever, right? It did two things. First, it stopped the cold airflow, providing some physical comfort. But more importantly,
What?
it halted the nightly special gas.
The one that knocked them out.
Exactly. The one that caused unconsciousness and enabled those blood extractions. By blocking that specific vent, they stopped that gas.
Wow. That's huge.
A major breakthrough in their resistance. Although they note the daytime gas continued as it came from a different source, that atomizer in the observation room, highlighting the multi-pronged nature of the assault they were enduring. Hashtag 7. Total neglect and perversion of justice.
So after more than 5 months of this intense isolation, this torment, they were finally allowed out of the cell a bit.
Yes, eventually allowed brief periods, maybe 1 to 2 hours out of isolation daily.
And they're conditioned by then.
Profoundly neglected and tormented, as they describe it, emaciated, with 15-centimeter-long uncombed hair, a beard, severely overgrown foot and fingernails.
Because they were denied clippers and razors.
For the entire duration, yes. They described themselves as a ghost-like figure wandering the ward.
That image. And the mental state.
Just as severe. The buyer explicitly states they looked like they had just come out of a KZ concentration camp. Compounding the physical neglect was the severe mental deterioration. They'd barely spoken for 5 months.
5 months of near silence.
Yes, and had effectively unlearned the art of human conversation. That profound lack of social interaction had fundamentally altered their ability to communicate, to connect.
And the denial of basic hygiene items, razors, clippers, what was the justification?
The staff justified it under the guise of safety, claiming the buyer might pinch someone with them.
Pinch someone with nail clippers.
It sounds like a flimsy excuse, doesn't it? It highlights, for the buyer, the dehumanizing aspect of their confinement, treating them not as someone needing care, but as this dangerous entity to be stripped of all dignity.
And there was something about a fixation shirt.
Yes, they were offered a fixation shirt, which the buyer describes as sexually humiliating. It's an open-backed garment, often used for restrained individuals for easy cleaning. They rightly rejected it.
So they were forced to stay in.
Their visibly stained, dirty isolation shirt, a stark symbol of their prolonged degradation, but also their resistance to that specific humiliation.
If we connect this degradation back to the bigger picture, what purpose did the buyer think it served?
From the buyer's perspective, this systematic degradation served a clear, chilling purpose: to break them down, physically and mentally.
To make them more susceptible.
Exactly. More susceptible to manipulation, and critically, to validate the psychotic diagnosis that they believed was being deliberately engineered by the institution.
So create the illness they intend to treat.
Precisely. A method, as described by the buyer, to deliberately create the symptoms, justify the diagnosis, and legitimize their continued confinement and coercive treatment.
Which leads directly into the legal process they describe, which sounds utterly malicious.
It does. The buyer recounts being intentionally provoked, with increasing doses of poisoning and gassing, specifically until they complained about the conditions.
So they wait for the complaint.
And then, those genuine complaints of torture and poisoning formed the very basis for a forced medication assessment.
Where the complaints themselves become the symptoms.
Exactly. Their factual experiences were diagnosed as poisoning and persecution delusions. It's this diabolical inversion of reality, twisting truth into pathology. Systemic gaslighting, essentially.
It strongly aligns with that concept, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Making someone doubt their own sanity by denying their reality.
On an institutional level, the buyer describes Black Site Berlin's entire plan as they saw it, torture them until they report it, then immediately use those factual reports as evidence of mental illness to justify forced medication.
A self-fulfilling prophecy of abuse, designed to completely invalidate their reality, their legitimate grievances.
And they were held in isolation until this whole twisted process was complete. They refused the assessment, trying to maintain their stance.
But denied a lawyer.
Denied legal counsel. Dismissed with the claim they were too crazy to make a call.
Unbelievable.
The verdict, 4 years of forced medication, was then illegally read to them, they say, through the hatch by shouting. No proper documentation, no signature, no due process.
Just shouted through a hatch.
A complete perversion of legal procedure.
And there was more discovered later. About a guardianship.
Yes. What's particularly startling is the buyer's later discovery of a covert guardianship Betreuung, in German, that apparently ran concurrently with this forced medication process.
Covert.
Yeah.
Meaning they didn't know about it.
Exactly. Legal documents, including the court verdict for forced medication, were sent directly to this guardian, completely bypassing the buyer, denying them any knowledge or recourse.
How did they find out?
A psychologist later inadvertently confirmed it during a conversation, but then, when pressed for details, vehemently denied it and threatened the buyer with further long-term isolation.
Revealing just how sensitive and hidden this aspect was.
Extremely. And this hidden guardianship aligns perfectly with an earlier incident the buyer recounts from Station 10A.
What happened there?
They discovered what they believed was a forged signature on a guardianship court document supposedly addressed to them when they confronted a staff member about it.
What was the reaction?
Violent. The staff member slammed the documentation book shut on the buyer's hand, confirming for the buyer that a dirty game was afoot.
Suggesting the deep state aimed to act in their name.
That's the buyer's interpretation. To act in their name through this criminal guardianship, further eroding their autonomy, likely connected to the control needed regarding the deed.
And finally, there was that criminal charge against the buyer.
Yes, the ultimate perversion of justice, as they see it. The dismissal of criminal proceedings against the buyer for, wait for it, threatening an unknown victim with a knife.
An unknown victim? How is that even possible?
The buyer points out the sheer absurdity. Any legitimate procedure needs a known victim. They conclude it was a fabricated crime, orchestrated systematically.
By whom?
By the black site staff, police, prosecutors, experts, courts, a clear division of labor by criminals, demonstrating the shocking depth of institutional corruption and coordination they believed they faced.
Yet, even though this absurd charge was dismissed,
The forced medication procedure continued unabated, and the buyer remained in isolation, based partly on this false accusation.
it just illustrates these layers of systemic corruption, manipulation, all designed, in the buyer's view, to maintain their confinement and control. A seemingly impenetrable cycle of injustice. Hashtag 8. A glimpse of the outside and unfinished business. So, after those 5 harrowing months, when they were finally allowed out for brief periods, they encountered someone they knew.
Yes, in that state of profound neglect, this ghost-like figure wandering the ward, they encountered an old acquaintance, the double-time gangster rapper.
But that name, quite specific.
It is a bizarre, almost surreal moment of unexpected connection amidst the chaos and degradation.
How did the rapper react to seeing the buyer?
Well, the rapper, described as being high on homemade alcohol and Tilladin,
Okay.
was visibly shocked by the buyer's appearance, asking, with what the buyer perceived as genuine concern, what happened to you?
Wow. That's powerful, isn't it? External validation of just how bad things had gotten.
Exactly. Seen through the eyes of someone else, someone not fully integrated into the black site system, perhaps.
And the rapper offered to help.
Surprisingly, yes. Despite his own state, he offered an act of kindness to trim the buyer's beard and cut their long hair.
How did they manage that? With the forbidden clippers.
Apparently, he got hold of some clippers and even used a fork as a makeshift attachment to manage the transition from the long, unkempt hair.
A fork. That's resourceful, I guess.
It highlights that desperate human need for normalcy, for self-care, even under the most bizarre circumstances. And these small, unexpected acts of empathy that can emerge. A brief glimmer of humanity.
But the haircut didn't get finished.
No. The haircut, described by the buyer rather darkly as an original psychiatry victim haircut, remained unfinished.
Why?
The rapper was abruptly called away to the garden, and there, his behavior described as highly conspicuous, smoking a joint openly with a caretaker from another station inevitably led to his immediate isolation upon returning to the ward.
So his act of kindness was cut short by the system's reaction to his own actions.
Precisely. And while it's about another patient, the incident clearly demonstrates the pervasive surveillance, the incredibly fragile nature of any perceived freedom or normalcy within that environment. Any deviation was swiftly met with punitive measures.
So this small interaction, though brief and interrupted,
It profoundly underscores the constant surveillance, the fragility of freedom. While the buyer did get their beard trimmed and eventually their nails cut under supervision later, the incident just reveals the ever-present control. The ever-watchful eye ensuring no true autonomy, no unmonitored interaction was possible for long. Hashtag outro.
wow, what a profound and deeply unsettling journey into the heart of the buyer's experiences within what they call Black Site Berlin, as chronicled entirely in their own words.
It really is. From those insidious sedations, the environmental tortures like prolonged freezing, to the systematic poisoning of food and water.
And the chilling blood extractions, for what the buyer believes is a plot to fake their death.
Yes. This account details a relentless, comprehensive assault on mind, body, and spirit. It's a story of meticulous, calculated suffering as they perceived it, and an absolutely unwavering will to survive through it all.
The layers of manipulation described, the weaponization of the legal system diagnosing factual complaints as delusions,
Yeah.
and that constant unseen hand of the deep state they believe was pulling the strings.
It all paints this picture of extraordinary and deeply disturbing conspiracy facts. This narrative, as presented by the buyer, forces us to consider the vulnerability of individuals against powerful, coordinated forces that, as described, operate far outside conventional law and ethics.
This deep dive, it reveals not just physical confinement, but a sophisticated system designed, as the buyer understands it, to erase identity, control narrative, and ultimately eliminate their agency, especially regarding this World Succession Deed 1400. Yet amidst all this, the buyer's resilience, their incredibly keen observation, their determination to expose the helpers, the perpetrators, as they see them, it stands as this powerful counter-narrative, an act of defiance through meticulous documentation, a refusal to be silenced.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really begs the question, doesn't it? In a world where such meticulously orchestrated operations are described as factual, where someone's identity, health, their very life can potentially be systematically undermined by a covert international deep state, how do societies protect themselves?
Protect themselves from narratives designed to discredit truth, to imprison people physically and psychologically.
Exactly. And perhaps more personally, how would you, the listener, navigate a reality where your own experiences, your own suffering, were systematically deemed delusional by those in power, where your very existence becomes potentially a pawn in a much larger game?
A truly provocative thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it has given you much to reflect upon.